Oh my God.
This is my daughter!
Eleanor, I've always respected your resolve. But some things in this world are carefully protected. She represents more than you realize.
Before we dive in, you and I need a deal. Forget the videos you just watched. Close those other browser tabs. Because the story you're about to witness isn't just a 15-minute entertainment clip. It's a test of compassion, of what family really means, and of the price of truth in a world built on powerful lies. Picture it. Chicago, January. The cold isn't just a temperature, it's a living thing. A razor-sharp wind off Lake Michigan slices through the glass and steel skyscrapers, where billion-dollar deals are struck by people who've never known real hunger. Tonight, one of those people, Eleanor Vance, CEO of a media empire, a woman who can rattle the stock market with a single press release, steps out of a five-star restaurant. Her commanding Tom Ford suit does nothing to stop the chill seeping into her bones. She's not chasing warmth. She's chasing silence. But in an alley lit only by a flickering, sickly yellow bulb, that silence shatters. Not with human voices, with a low, defiant growl. And then she sees it, a scene crueler than any news story she's ever edited. A child, no, a tiny figure in a tattered coat, facing off against a hulking stray cat. They're not fighting over a toy. It's half a moldy bread roll lying in a pile of trash. This isn't just poverty. It's survival in its rawest form. God, those eyes. They're not the eyes of a 9-year-old. They're the eyes of a warrior, too familiar with defeat, but never surrendering. They burn with vigilance, defiance, and a sorrow so deep it could drown this whole city. Our story doesn't start with a plea for scraps. It starts with an unthinkable truth. A child presumed dead for 20 years now stands before her mother, fighting a cat for food in a Chicago alley. But how? Why? What horrific secret has been buried for 2 decades? And why does one of America's top tech billionaires want the DNA of an abandoned kid? Join me on this journey, because the answers will shatter everything you thought you knew about justice and motherhood. Time seemed to freeze in that frigid Chicago alley. For Eleanor Vance, the world around her blurred into a haze of neon lights and falling snow. The distant wail of an ambulance, the wind howling through the skyscrapers, all faded to nothing. All she heard was the blood pounding in her ears, a frantic drumbeat merging with the pulse of a memory she thought was buried under 20 years of grief's ashes. The wooden sparrow. It wasn't jewelry, it was a promise. A mother's whisper to her unborn child, carved in sunlit afternoons, dreaming of a future that never came. Her breath caught in her chest, not from the cold, but from an impossible truth taking shape. Where did you get that? Eleanor's voice broke, trembling, a vulnerability she'd never shown anyone. The girl, Chloe, flinched back, her eyes narrowing with wariness. Survival instincts told her that sudden interest from a stranger, especially a wealthy one, always came with a price. "It's mine," she whispered, her small, dirty hand clutching the sparrow through her tattered coat. "Always been mine. Always been mine." Those words, instead of discouraging Eleanor, drilled into her mind like a blade. She realized her mistake. She couldn't approach this child as a CEO or a desperate mother searching for her lost daughter. She had to meet her as someone who understood survival. Eleanor took a deep breath, steadying her racing heart. She stepped back, raising both hands in a gesture of surrender. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice now calmer, softer. "It's beautiful. I didn't mean anything by it." She looked into Chloe's eyes, seeing past the prickly defenses to a small body shivering uncontrollably in the cold. "You don't have to trust me," Eleanor said slowly, choosing each word with care. "But it's freezing tonight, and it's only getting colder. I've got hot soup and a warm bed at my place, just for one night. No questions. Come morning, you can leave if you want." Chloe didn't answer. She just stared, her sharp eyes analyzing, calculating. The offer was too good to be true. But the cold was real. The hunger clawing at her stomach was real. 3 years on the streets had taught her that sometimes a chance, no matter how risky, was all you had. The hesitation in her eyes was the answer Eleanor needed. The drive to the penthouse on the 90th floor of the John Hancock Center passed in silence. Chloe huddled in the far corner of the leather-lined Mercedes, her hand never leaving the wooden sparrow. She'd never been in an elevator so fast and smooth, like being pulled into another world. When the elevator doors opened directly into the apartment, Chloe caught her breath. A vast space unfolded before her. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls showcased Chicago's glittering skyline like a man-made galaxy. The white marble floors gleamed, minimalist furniture arranged with cold, expensive precision, like an art gallery. No family photos, no knickknacks, just space, silence, and a pervasive loneliness. This place was bigger than every shelter she'd ever stayed in combined. "You can shower first," Eleanor's voice broke the quiet. "Bathrooms down the hall. I'll get some food ready." In a bathroom larger than most motel rooms, Chloe stared at the pristine porcelain tub. She turned on the hot water, watching steam rise and feeling warmth spread. For the first time in months, she washed in clean water. It rinsed away the street's grime, revealing pale skin and old bruises. When Chloe emerged, wrapped in a fluffy towel twice her size, she was trembling. Eleanor had set out a steaming bowl of chicken soup and a pair of her own silk pajamas on the bed. But when she saw Chloe's face, she knew something was wrong. "You okay?" Eleanor stepped closer, placing a hand on the girl's forehead. Her skin burned like fire. The kid was running a high fever. A fever, a minor issue for most, became both a spark of hope and a gnawing fear for Eleanor. It was a valid reason to call a doctor, to run tests, to seek undeniable biological proof. She gently helped Chloe onto the bed, draping a cashmere blanket soft as a cloud over her. The poor kid looked so small, so out of place in this cold luxury. As Chloe drifted off, exhausted and feverish, Eleanor sat beside her, silently studying her sleeping face. 20 years of pain seemed to erupt, not in tears, but in a cold, burning rage forming in her veins. The calm CEO facade was gone. All that remained was the investigative journalist who'd faced down the most dangerous men. All that remained was a mother. She pulled out her phone, scrolling to a number she hadn't called in years. She didn't know who'd done this or why, but looking at the wooden sparrow on the bedside table next to her fevered child, she knew one thing for certain. They would pay. For every lost day, every tear shed, and every freezing night her daughter had endured. Her investigation wasn't just starting. It was reborn. Outside the window, Chicago pulsed on, a vast web of light and shadow. But inside the 90th floor penthouse, a different world took shape, taut with silent tension. Eleanor Vance didn't waste a second. Her first call wasn't to the police, but to Dr. Alistair Finch, the Vance family's private physician for 30 years, a man used to guarding secrets worth more than market shares. "Alistair," Eleanor's voice was steady, masking the storm within. "I need you here now. Hancock Building. Bring the portable blood testing kit. It's a high fever case. And, Alistair, absolute discretion." Her second call required a different kind of trust, forged not in boardrooms but on the city's dangerous streets. She dialed a number she knew by heart. "Miller here." The voice on the other end was gruff, weary, the sound of a man who'd seen too much of humanity's underbelly. Frank Miller, former police detective, the last friend from her fearless days as an investigative reporter. "Frank, it's me, Elle," she said quickly. "I need you to dig into someone." "Marcus Thorne." A brief pause. "Thorne? Tech billionaire Thorne? Elle, are you kidding? Going after him is like poking a hornet's nest with an army guarding it." "I'm not kidding," Eleanor's voice sharpened. "I need everything on him. Financial dealings, connections, shell companies, especially anything from 20 years ago, around St. Jude Hospital. Dig deep, Frank. Dig like my life depends on it." "What's going on, Elle?" Frank asked, his weariness giving way to real concern. Eleanor glanced at the sleeping girl on the bed. "I think I just found a ghost," she whispered, then hung up. Dr. Finch arrived like a shadow, quiet and efficient. An older man with wise eyes, he'd treated Eleanor since she was a young woman with a rare genetic condition. He asked no questions, just did his work. As he gently drew blood from Chloe's thin arm, Eleanor felt a numbing helplessness. She could command an empire, but right now, she was just a worried mother, a role she'd never been taught. Half an hour later, when the portable analyzer's results flashed on the screen, Dr. Finch frowned slightly. He glanced at the display, then at Eleanor, then at the sleeping girl. "Eleanor," he began, his voice hesitant. "The fever's from a common infection, treatable with antibiotics. But there's something else, a biomarker in her blood." "Tell me, Alistair, it's a glycogen storage disorder." "Type 9 alpha, specifically," he said, removing his glasses to wipe them. "Eleanor, it's the exact rare subtype you have. The statistical odds of 2 unrelated people carrying this gene, it's practically impossible, 1 in tens of millions." The room seemed to shrink. Dr. Finch's words weren't a surprise, but a final hammer blow, slamming shut the door of doubt and opening another to painful truth and rage. It was real. All of it was real. The next morning, Chloe woke as the first rays of dawn lit the vast room. Her fever had broken, but her body still ached. The first thing she noticed was the quiet. No garbage trucks, no shouting, no bone-cutting cold. Just the soft hum of filtered air. Eleanor sat in a chair nearby, having stayed up all night. "Good morning," Eleanor said gently. "How do you feel?" Chloe just nodded, still wary. Eleanor handed her a pill and a glass of water. "Take this. It'll help with the fever." Chloe looked at the pill, then the crystal-clear water, then the woman before her. In all her years on the streets, when sick, she'd curled up in some dark corner, waiting for the illness to pass. No one had ever given her medicine or brought her water. She took the glass, her thin fingers brushing Eleanor's, and in that moment, a fragile but unmistakable spark of connection passed between them. "Why?" Chloe asked, her voice hoarse. "Why are you doing this?" Eleanor met Chloe's piercing blue eyes, so like her own. She couldn't tell her the full truth. It would be too much for a child. But she couldn't lie either. "Because," she began, her voice sincere, 20 years ago, "I lost something more precious than all the money or power in the world. And I think I might have just found it again." Just then, Eleanor's phone buzzed, a new message lighting up the screen. It was from Frank. Movement. Thorne funded a special project wing at St. Jude. Matches the month your daughter died. "This is dirty, Elle. Real dirty." Eleanor read the text, and a cold, resolute smile spread across her lips. The game was truly on. Frank Miller's message struck the penthouse's silence like a thunderbolt, a cold confirmation of what Eleanor's heart had been screaming. Marcus Thorne was there. He'd been there from the start. Her rage sharpened into a singular blade-like focus. She needed to meet Frank. Now. But as she turned, her eyes met Chloe's. The girl perched on the oversized bed, her wide, sharp eyes tracking Eleanor's every move. She couldn't just leave. Abandoning a child freshly pulled from the shadows would be a cruel repeat of history. She had to build trust, even if just a fragile thread. "Chloe," Eleanor said, her voice softening, shedding the CEO's edge for a warmth she thought she'd lost. "I need to step out for a bit. Something important needs handling." Chloe's shoulders tensed, a reflex of self-preservation etched deep. Being left behind, the story of her life. "I'll be back," Eleanor said firmly, kneeling to meet her eyes. "I promise. This is your home now, Chloe. No one gets in without my say-so. You're safe." She pointed to the massive entertainment system on the wall. "You can watch anything you want. There's ice cream in the fridge. Chocolate." A faint spark lit Chloe's eyes at the mention of ice cream, a rare glimpse of childhood. She gave a small nod. That was the permission Eleanor needed. Frank Miller's office was a stark contrast to Eleanor's world. A cramped room on the second floor of a rundown building in Chicago's West Side, reeking of old paper, stale coffee, and forgotten cases. Frank was waiting, his weathered face tighter than usual. On his cluttered desk, old blueprints and files were spread out. "It's worse than we thought, Elle," Frank said the moment Eleanor stepped in, skipping pleasantries. He pointed to a blueprint of St. Jude Hospital from 20 years ago. "This is the NICU, where your daughter was cared for." He jabbed at an adjacent section labeled Thorne Biomedical Research Wing. That special project wing Thorne funded wasn't some charity office. It was a cutting-edge genetics lab, equipped with tech even the government would have envied back then, and its entrance had military-grade security. A chill ran down Eleanor's spine. "What are you saying?" "Think about it," Frank continued, his voice low. The official story was a small electrical fire in the NICU. A few infants were evacuated. Your daughter, too weak, didn't make it. But the fire's records are thin as hell. No major damage reports, no fire department investigation. It feels staged. He leaned forward, his eyes boring into hers. "My theory? There was no fire, Elle. It was a cover, a setup to move high-potential infants from the NICU, through that wall, straight into Thorne's private lab. Your daughter didn't die. She was taken right there in the hospital." Meanwhile, back at the penthouse, Chloe, having polished off the chocolate ice cream, began her own exploration. She wasn't drawn to the expensive gadgets. Instead, a closed oak door, Eleanor's study, caught her eye. It wasn't locked. Maybe Eleanor forgot in her rush. Inside, it was different from the rest of the apartment. Warmer, more alive. The walls were lined with framed, yellowed newspaper clippings. Chloe recognized Eleanor in black and white photos. Younger, hair wild, eyes blazing, standing beside a man with the gruff voice she'd overheard on the phone. This was another side of the woman. Then she saw it. A small, simple wooden box tucked behind a stack of books on the desk. Curiosity pulled her in. She opened it. Inside was a treasure of a broken heart. A faded ultrasound image. A plastic hospital bracelet labeled Baby Vance. And at the bottom, a handwritten letter on aged paper. Chloe, who'd taught herself to read from discarded newspapers, began sounding out the words. "To my little star," the letter began. "I don't know if you'll be a boy or a girl, but I know I love you more than anything in the world. I promise to give you everything. I'm carving a little gift for you, a wooden sparrow, so it will always fly with you, even when I'm not there." Chloe kept reading, tears blurring the words. The letter spoke of dreams, hopes, and boundless love. There it was. The answer to everything. The sudden warmth, the hot soup, the soft bed, the fever pill. This wasn't a stranger's pity. When Eleanor returned, Heavy with the chilling truth of a genetics lab, she found her study door open. She stepped inside and froze. Chloe sat on the floor, the wooden box open beside her, clutching the letter to her chest. She looked up, tears streaming down her face, but her eyes held no fear or distrust. In that moment, 20 years of silence collapsed. Every lie burned away. Mother and daughter, torn apart by a cruel conspiracy, had finally found each other in a raw, painful truth. No words were spoken, but they both understood. Their fight was just beginning. And this time, they'd fight together. The silence in Eleanor's study was heavy, not with distance, but with a truth too vast for words. Eleanor gently closed the door and sat on the floor beside Chloe. No longer the towering CEO, she was a mother, level with her daughter's pain and hope. Chloe looked up, her blue eyes mirror images of Eleanor's, brimming with tears but free of confusion. Her trembling hand held out the letter. A single word slipped from her cracked lips, both a question and a confirmation. "Mom?" Eleanor's heart shattered and mended in an instant. She nodded, her voice choked with 20 years of suppressed emotion. "Yes, my little star. It's me." She pulled Chloe into her arms. Their first embrace was clumsy, raw with feeling. Eleanor felt how fragile and thin the girl was, a painful reminder of the years she'd endured. For Chloe, it was the first time in her life she felt a safe embrace, a warmth that asked for nothing, a place where she could finally lower her guard. They held each other, their tears saying what words couldn't. After a long moment, Eleanor pulled back gently. The sorrow lingered, but it was now fueled by iron resolve. She looked into Chloe's eyes. "Listen, Chloe," she said, her voice steady. "We don't have much time. The man who tore us apart is Marcus Thorne. He's powerful and dangerous. Now that we've found each other, he won't let us be." Chloe listened, her street-sharpened intelligence clear in her gaze. "I need your help," Eleanor continued, treating her as a true ally. "Your memory, is it sharp? Do you remember the places you've been, the people you've met? Any detail, no matter how small, could be the key." Chloe fell silent, her eyes distant, sifting through a fractured archive of memories. "I've been to a lot of places," she said softly. "They always moved me, especially when I started feeling settled." She frowned. "But there was one place. The Kelly's house. They were kind. Mrs. Kelly used to bake me cookies. Do you remember anything else from that time?" "A man used to visit," Chloe said, her voice hesitant. "Not a social worker. He wore fancy clothes, his shoes, so shiny I could see my reflection. He never talked to me, just to Mrs. Kelly. His voice was cold as ice." Eleanor held her breath. "What did he say?" "I don't remember everything," Chloe shook her head. "But once I overheard him. He said I was part of something bigger. A legacy project." "Legacy project," Eleanor repeated, each syllable like a cold stone dropping in her stomach. The name sounded arrogant, grandiose, exactly like Marcus Thorne. That was it, the name of his crime. Just as they hit their first breakthrough, a sharp beep pierced the air. The penthouse, Eleanor's impenetrable tech fortress, turned traitor. The smart lights flickered. Then every screen in the room, TV, computer, even the tablet on the desk, lit up. They didn't show news or stock tickers. They showed one face, Marcus Thorne's face. He sat in a sleek office, smiling a casual, smug smile. He stared into the camera, as if seeing through the lens, straight into Eleanor's study, at the mother and daughter on the floor. "Eleanor," Thorne's voice boomed from every speaker, low, warm, and dripping with condescension. "I've always admired your persistence, but you need to understand some assets don't belong to you. He paused, letting his words sink into the horrified silence. The child is an investment, Eleanor, a long-term project, and I always protect my investments. His gaze shifted, seemingly locking onto Chloe. His smile widened, but his eyes grew colder. "Welcome back," he said, his voice thick with absolute possession. "Asset number 7. Asset number 7. The words were crueler than a slap, stripping Chloe of her name, her humanity, reducing her to a number in a sick scheme. The screens went dark. The lights returned to normal. Silence fell again, now laced with tangible fear. He knew, not just that they'd found each other, he was watching. He'd breached their safest sanctuary. Eleanor didn't hesitate. Shock gave way to a warrior's instincts. She grabbed her phone, her face hardening like stone. She called Frank. "Frank, pull back now!" she snapped. "He knows! He's in my system! He saw everything! We have to disappear, right now! The reunion was over. The escape had just begun." "Frank, pull back now!" Eleanor snapped. "He knows! He's in my system! He saw everything! We have to disappear, right now!" On the other end, Frank Miller's voice held no panic, only the cold professionalism of someone seasoned by crises. "Listen carefully, Elle. Ditch your phone. Now, don't use the main elevator, don't go to the garage. You still remember Plan B for that building? Plan B, a relic from her investigative reporting days, when Eleanor always prepared for the worst. "I remember," she replied. "Good. I'll be at the rendezvous. 15 minutes. Bring only what's essential. Cash, no credit cards. And Eleanor, don't let anyone see you." The call ended. The lavish penthouse now felt like a glass cage. Eleanor turned to Chloe. The girl didn't cry or scream. She just stood there, eyes wide, fear tempered by street-honed survival instincts. She was ready to run. "Chloe, get dressed," Eleanor ordered, her voice firm and clear, leaving no room for hesitation. "Warmest clothes you've got. Only what you can carry while running." Chloe didn't question, just nodded and vanished into the bedroom. Seconds later, she returned in jeans and a sweater, clutching her coat. The wooden sparrow was tucked carefully into her pocket. Eleanor didn't bother with luxuries. She went straight to a wall in the utility room, tapping 3 times in a specific rhythm. A panel slid open, revealing a hidden safe. Inside wasn't jewelry, but an old backpack stuffed with cash, a set of IDs under a different name, and an outdated satellite phone. She grabbed the bag, tossing her expensive phone into a decorative water vase, destroying it instantly. "Follow me," she said, taking Chloe's hand. She didn't lead her to the gilded elevator, but to a service closet at the hall's end. Behind brooms and chemical jugs was a handleless metal door. Eleanor pressed a loose brick nearby, and the door creaked open with a click. Inside was another world, a grimy freight elevator reeking of grease and dust. As the metal door clanged shut, darkness and the rumble of machinery enveloped them. They descended, not in luxury, but through the skyscraper's hidden machinery. "Where is this?" Chloe whispered, her voice faint in the noise. "It's the way out," Eleanor replied, eyes scanning the control panel. "The place no one thinks of." They moved through a maze of basement tunnels, past massive pipes and waste processing areas. The air was thick and damp, a cruel contrast to the pristine, filtered air of the 90th floor. For Eleanor, it was humbling. For Chloe, it was sadly familiar. As they passed a small security monitoring room in the basement, Eleanor's heart stopped. The guard was slumped, asleep at his desk. But on the dozens of screens before him, there were no security feeds. Every screen flashed a green line of text, pulsing like an electronic heartbeat. "Where are you running, Eleanor?" He was here. Not just in her penthouse system. He'd infiltrated the entire building. He was toying with them, letting them see this message as a reminder. This escape was only happening because he allowed it.
Eleanor yanked Chloe forward, her steps faster, more urgent. They reached an emergency exit leading to a dark, cold alley, thick with the stench of wet trash. The winter air had never felt so precious. An unremarkable old sedan idled at the alley's end, its headlights flicking off and on once. Frank's signal. They dove into the car, and Frank floored it, blending into Chicago's traffic. "He saw us, Frank," Eleanor gasped. "He knows every move." "I know," Frank replied, eyes glued to the rearview mirror. "He's trying to scare you. Don't let him win. Where to now?" Eleanor stared out the window, the city's lights streaking by like shooting stars. She had a place in mind, a ghost from her past, a final sanctuary. "The print shop," she said. Frank nodded, no questions asked. He knew what the print shop was. Eleanor's first office as a freelance journalist, a dusty attic rented under a fake name, paid for in cash. It didn't exist on any digital map. It was an analog relic in a world Marcus Thorne dominated. In the car's silence, Chloe, drained by fear and stress, leaned her head on Eleanor's shoulder and drifted off. Eleanor looked down at her daughter's sleeping face, her hand tightening instinctively on the backpack. Rage still burned, now fused with a fierce, protective love. He might own the digital world. He might see everything. But he didn't have this. She looked at Chloe. "I've got her," she thought, "and I'll burn his world down to keep her safe." Frank Miller's car glided through Chicago's glitzy neighborhoods and sank into the city's underbelly, where old brick warehouses stood silent like sleeping giants. He stopped in front of an unremarkable 3-story building, its faded sign reading Allied Printing Services, a name long forgotten. Frank killed the engine, and for a moment silence enveloped them, different from the penthouse's opulent hush. This was the silence of oblivion. "We're here," Frank said. Eleanor gently woke Chloe. As they stepped out, the night's chill seeped through Chloe's coat, but she didn't shiver. Something about this place, its worn, quiet age, felt safer to her than the 90th floor glass walls. Frank used an old key to open a rusted lock. The door creaked, revealing a wooden staircase leading up. The smell hit Eleanor first, a scent she hadn't realized she'd missed. Old paper, printing ink, and the dust of time. The print shop wasn't just an office. It was a museum of Eleanor's past. A massive offset printer sat dormant under a tarp. Stacks of old newspapers reached the ceiling. On the main wall, a huge corkboard still held pinned black and white photos, handwritten notes, and red strings connecting dots, remnants of a political corruption case Eleanor exposed 20 years ago, the one that won her a Pulitzer and painted a target on her back. While Frank methodically checked windows and swept for bugs out of habit, Eleanor cleared an old sofa, brushing off thick dust and spreading a wool blanket over it. "You can sleep here, Chloe," she said softly. But Chloe's eyes weren't on the sofa. They were drawn to the investigation board. She stepped closer, her small fingers brushing a photo of a younger Eleanor outside City Hall, eyes blazing with defiance. She was seeing her mother's true self, not the powerful CEO, but a warrior. Once Frank confirmed the place was secure, the three sat around an old wooden table. Frank poured 3 cups of cold coffee from his thermos. "All right," he began. "We're up against a ghost with billions and the ability to infiltrate every corner of your life. He knows you found each other. The question isn't, what will he do, but why now?" Eleanor nodded, his words echoing her thoughts. "Exactly. Why, after 20 years of silence, does Chloe show up? He's controlled her through the foster system all this time. Her finding me right outside my restaurant can't be a coincidence." She looked at Chloe, who listened quietly, her sharp eyes soaking up every word. "Thorne's playing a bigger game. And we're just realizing we're pieces on his board. He wanted us to find each other. But why? As Eleanor and Frank dove into theories, a trap, leverage for some endgame, or a cruel mind game, Chloe focused on the one thing that was hers in this world, the wooden sparrow. She'd held it through the entire escape. Now, under the shop's dim yellow light, she traced its carvings, feeling every groove. Then her thumb caught something odd. A tiny, almost invisible seam where the sparrow's head met its body. Not a crack. It was too perfect. With the patience of someone used to scrutinizing scraps for survival, Chloe gently twisted. A soft click broke the quiet. Eleanor and Frank turned. Chloe held the sparrow in two halves. It wasn't solid wood. It was a tiny box, a cleverly disguised locket. Inside wasn't a photo. It was a tightly coiled microfilm, thin as a thread. Eleanor took it with trembling hands. So small, so fragile. Frank squinted, his seasoned cop instincts recognizing it instantly. "My God," he whispered. "Microfilm. Cold War tech." He held it to the light. "Look how it's hidden, Elle. This isn't Thorne's style. He's all digital games, cloud data, AI. This is something else." He looked at Eleanor, urgency flashing in his eyes. "This isn't a message from Thorne. It feels like a warning, or a plea for help." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "From someone inside his organization." The microfilm rested in Eleanor's palm, fragile yet heavy with 20 years of lies. Frank Miller handled it carefully, like an archaeologist with a sacred relic. "This tech's ancient," Frank muttered, squinting under the warehouse's dim yellow light. "Nobody uses this anymore unless they're desperate to hide something from the digital world. Whoever sent this didn't trust email, servers, or anything hackable." "Can you read it?" Eleanor asked, her voice urgent. "Not here," Frank shook his head. "But I know a guy, an eccentric old-timer who collects Cold War spy gear. His basement's like a KGB museum. Let me go alone. It's safer." Eleanor nodded. Waiting while answers were so close was torture, but she knew Frank was right. Her top priority now was protecting Chloe. When Frank left, the print shop sank back into stillness. The adrenaline of their escape faded, leaving exhaustion and a fragile new reality. Eleanor looked at Chloe, perched on the old sofa, her small feet dangling above the floor. She realized she knew almost nothing about her daughter's life. "Chloe," she began softly, "did you ever get to go to school?" Chloe shook her head. "They moved me too much. Just when I'd get used to a school, they'd ship me somewhere else." She looked at her hands. "But I taught myself to read. From old newspapers in trash cans, from thrown-out books. Words were the one thing nobody could take from me." Eleanor's heart clenched. The daughter she'd dreamed would attend elite universities had learned to read from society's scraps. Her rage at Marcus Thorne was no longer just personal. It was fury at a system that allowed this crime, at a childhood stolen so cruelly. 2 hours later, Frank returned. Not alone. He carried a heavy metal suitcase. Inside was an ancient microfilm reader, looking like a projector from a bygone century. They turned off all lights but one small bulb. Frank carefully loaded the film. A click sounded, and a dusty beam of light hit the bare brick wall, turning it into a makeshift screen. The first images flickered, grainy and black and white. Technical documents, complex gene sequences, tracking charts. Eleanor recognized it instantly, raw data from the Legacy Project. Then a face appeared, a woman with dark hair, intelligent but weary eyes, radiating defiant resilience. Eleanor's breath caught. She knew this woman. The world knew her. Dr. Eris Thorne, the brilliant geneticist, Marcus Thorne's gifted wife, presumed dead in a tragic yacht accident 11 years ago. The sender wasn't some low-level employee. It was a ghost. Text began scrolling on the wall, typed on an old typewriter. Eris's message. If you're reading this, Eleanor, it means I've failed, but our last hope hasn't. I didn't die. I staged my death to escape the monster I once called my husband. Each line unveiled a horrifying story. Eris had uncovered the true purpose of the Legacy Project. Marcus wasn't just researching genetics. He wanted to own them. He collected children with rare genes, raising them in the system as biological assets, aiming to patent their unique DNA, turning life into intellectual property. Then, the answer to the biggest question emerged. Marcus is dying, the next line read. His neurodegenerative disease is ravaging him. He's desperate. He's accelerating the project, seeking a cure from the very children he's held captive. He let Chloe surface deliberately. She's bait. Eleanor's chest tightened. He needs you, Eleanor. Your rare disease-resistant gene, passed to Chloe, is the key he believes can save him. He wants to corner you, to take you both. Chloe isn't the endgame. She's the trap. As images of the lab and a list of other assets flashed by, Chloe suddenly pointed at the screen. Leo, she said, her voice trembling. Asset number 4. Leo, I know him. He was at the last foster home with me. He coughed a lot. One day they came and took him away. The truth hit like a sledgehammer. These children were real, and they were in imminent danger. The film's final frame appeared, a detailed map of a private island off Maine with encoded coordinates. Below, Eris Thorne's last message. His private lab. He's moving the final candidates there. Stop him. Avenge us all. The projector's beam cut off. The 3 stood in darkness. The escape was over. The hunt and rescue had just begun. They had a target. They had a destination. And they knew time was running out. The brick wall of the print shop was no longer a makeshift screen. It had become a gravestone, etched with Marcus Thorne's crimes in light and shadow. As the microfilm reader's final beam flickered out, the room sank into a heavy silence, thicker than decades of dust. They had their answer, and it was worse than any theory they could have imagined. Frank Miller spoke first, his voice rough, like he'd swallowed broken glass. A private lab on an island. He's playing God. Jesus, Elle, we're not just up against a billionaire, we're facing a madman. Chloe shivered, gripping Eleanor's hand. The name Leo and the image of her frail friend haunted her mind. Her own fear gave way to a greater one, fear for a friend held captive. But Eleanor Vance was done with fear. Horror, rage, and 20 years of anguish had crystallized into something else, ice-cold clarity. She was no longer a victim or a mother searching for her child. She was a hunter, and her prey had just shown itself. We're going there, Eleanor said, her voice unwavering. Not a question, but a declaration. She flicked on an old desk lamp, its light carving a warm circle in the dark, and spread the microfilm's map across the table. Frank, this island's a fortress. Satellites, sonar, motion sensors, mercenaries. He'll have everything money can buy to protect his legacy. Exactly, Frank agreed, pointing at the map. A frontal assault is suicide. We can't roll up in a yacht or chopper. We'd be spotted miles out. Then we don't play by his rules, Eleanor replied, her investigative journalist's eyes alight. We don't go as invaders. We go as ghosts. She tapped the encoded coordinates Eris Thorne had left. This isn't just the lab's location. Eris was brilliant. It's a weak point, a hidden entry. As Eleanor and Frank pored over the map, deciphering Eris's intent, a seawater cooling duct, a forgotten service tunnel. Chloe, silently studying the projected documents on the wall, spoke up. This doctor, she said, her small finger pointing at a photo in the project's personnel list. It was Dr. Alan Evans, a pediatrician with a kind smile. "I've seen him." Eleanor and Frank turned to her. "You're sure, Chloe?" "Positive," Chloe said firmly. He came to the Kellys with the man in shiny shoes. He checked on Leo, said it was just asthma. She frowned, digging into her memory. Something else was weird. He's allergic to peanuts. Mrs. Kelly had to hide all the peanut butter when he visited. He almost went into anaphylactic shock from a cookie with some peanut crumbs. A childish detail, seemingly irrelevant. But to Eleanor and Frank, it flashed like lightning. A vulnerability. Not structural, but human. Dr. Evans was a doctor, sworn to protect life, yet part of an inhumane project. That meant he could be swayed. More importantly, he had a specific biological weakness, one they could exploit to create chaos at the critical moment. A plan snapped into focus, no longer vague theories, but concrete steps. "Frank," Eleanor ordered, "I need you to tap your old contacts. Find us a fishing boat, something beat up, low profile enough to slip through those waters unnoticed, and gear up. Diving equipment, cutting tools, everything we need to breach a service duct." "Got it?" Frank nodded. "And I," Eleanor continued, "I'll dig into Dr. Evans. Family, debts, secrets. Everyone has a breaking point. I'll find his." She looked at Chloe, not just with a mother's love, but with newfound respect. This child, with her painful memories, was their most valuable intelligence asset. "Marcus Thorne thinks you're asset number 7, Eleanor said, resting a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "He's wrong. You're our secret weapon." Chloe met her mother's eyes, then Frank's. For the first time, she wasn't just a fugitive. She was part of a team. A powerful sense of belonging took root in her heart. In the dusty old print shop, amid ghosts of the past, 3 people, a journalist, a former cop, and a surviving child, came together. They had no army, no billions, but they had the truth, resolve, and each other. The strike on a madman's island was planned, and they would not fail. In the 72 hours that followed, the print shop was no longer a quiet refuge. It had become the nerve center of a 3-person military operation. Time was a luxury they didn't have. Every second brought Marcus Thorne closer to his goal, and the children on that island, including Leo, closer to an unthinkable fate. The old desk was now buried under satellite maps of Maine's coast, tidal charts, and detailed schematics of the service duct Eris Thorne had pointed to. Eleanor, working on an encrypted laptop Frank had brought, moved like a fox in a digital desert. She was no longer CEO Eleanor Vance. She was Elle, the investigative reporter who once kept politicians awake at night. Her target was Dr. Alan Evans. And she'd found his crack. Evans wasn't evil. He was a desperate father. His daughter had a rare illness, with treatment costs in the millions. Records showed those medical bills were paid anonymously by a charitable fund. After hours of digging, Eleanor traced it back to a shell company fully funded by Thorne's conglomerate. Marcus didn't buy Evans's loyalty with money. He bought it with his daughter's life. Evans wasn't a conspirator. He was a hostage. Meanwhile, Frank disappeared and returned with heavy duffel bags. He pulled out black dive suits, bubble-free rebreather tanks, sturdy ropes, and a compact plasma cutting kit. He explained each item to Eleanor calmly, as if prepping for a camping trip, not a break-in at a mad billionaire's fortress. Chloe was the glue binding it all. She didn't just sit idle. Her sharp memory and keen observation became invaluable assets. She helped Eleanor cross-check maps, spotting anomalies an adult might miss. When Eleanor showed her photos of the island's staff, obtained through Frank's old contacts, Chloe recognized a face. "This guy?" she said, pointing to a hardened security officer. "He worked at one of my foster homes. Everyone was scared of him. He patrolled at night." Another piece snapped into place. They now knew a specific enemy inside. After 3 sleepless days of preparation, they set out. They left Chicago under cover of night in Frank's beat-up car. They drove in shifts, using only cash, ditching burner phones every few hundred miles. It was a journey through America's heart, but they saw nothing but empty roads and cheap motels. Finally, they reached a small fishing port in Maine. The air tasted of salt and reeked of diesel. Seagulls wailed mournfully in the thick fog rolling in from the sea. This was the edge of the world, the starting point for their impossible mission. Their vessel was waiting. The Wanderer, a rusty, fish-scented fishing boat. Its captain, Silas, was a taciturn man with a salt and pepper beard and eyes that had seen too many storms. An old friend of Frank's, he asked no questions when cash changed hands. As the Wanderer eased from the dock, blending into the fog, the reality hit. They were really doing this. Thorns Island lay hours away, a dark smudge in the icy Atlantic. In the cramped, stuffy cabin, Eleanor spread the map one last time. She looked at Frank, then Chloe. Fear hung in the air, as real as the fog outside, but their resolve was stronger. "Chloe," Eleanor said, her voice serious but warm with love. "When Frank and I go in, you'll stay here with Captain Silas. You'll be our eyes and ears." She handed Chloe a small, simple radio. "Hold on to this. Every 15 minutes, I'll check in. If you don't hear from me after 30, tell Silas to leave and call the emergency number Frank gave you. Got it?" Chloe looked at the radio, then at her mother. She wasn't being left behind. She had a role. She was part of the mission, their lifeline. "I got it," she said, her voice steady. "Good girl," Eleanor smiled. Then, through the fog, it appeared. A looming black shape, a rocky island rising from the gray sea. At its highest point, a single, cold, artificial light pulsed steadily. The laboratory, the enemy's fortress. Silas cut the engine, and the boat drifted silently, a ghost on the water. Planning time was over. It was time to face the monster in its lair. The fog wrapped the Wanderer like a cloak, shielding them from the island's electronic eyes. Beneath the surface, the Atlantic's icy grip was a shock, but Eleanor and Frank didn't flinch. They sank into the liquid darkness, guided only by the faint beams of their headlamps, flickers of hope in the void. They found the service duct Eris's map had marked, guarded by a thick metal grate. Frank activated the mini plasma cutter. Underwater, its sound was muffled to a low hiss, a brilliant blue arc slicing through the dark. After 10 tense minutes, the grate fell away, revealing a black maw. They swam inside. The tunnel was tight, dark, and suffocating. Their rebreather tanks' soft hisses were the only sound. This was a journey into the beast's heart, a stark contrast to Eleanor's glass tower life. After an endless stretch, they found an iron ladder leading up. They surfaced in a maintenance room, the air heavy with antiseptic and humming machinery. The silence here was more unnerving than the tunnel's clamor. They were inside. Eleanor pulled out the satellite phone. She sent an encrypted message to the number Frank had dug up for Dr. Alan Evans. Just a photo of his smiling daughter and a cold line. "We know. Help us, or she'll never get her next dose." It was ruthless blackmail, something the Eleanor of a year ago would never have done. But today's Eleanor would do anything to save her daughter and the other children. Minutes later, a shrill alarm blared through the complex. An automated voice echoed from the speakers. "Biosafety alert. Code blue. Main lab area contaminated with allergen. All security personnel report to Sector A, Doctor." Evans had acted. He'd created the chaos they needed. Under the cover of the fake evacuation, Eleanor and Frank moved swiftly, following Eris's schematic to Thorne's private quarters. The door opened to a room that wasn't a prison, but a high-end ICU. In the center, Leo, the boy Chloe had named, lay on a bed, his skin pale, his body wired to machines. And there, back to them, staring at the boy, was Marcus Thorne. He turned, unsurprised. "I knew you'd come, Eleanor," he said, his voice eerily calm. "The maternal bond, a fascinating biological variable." "Release the boy, Marcus," Eleanor growled, as Frank quietly moved toward Leo's bed. "Release him." Thorne smirked. "He's part of the collection. Like you, like your daughter. That child, asset number 7, is perfect. She carries your genes, Eleanor. Genes of resilience, survival. Do you know how valuable your genome is? It's not just about cures. It's the key to evolution, to immortality. That's the true legacy project." He spoke of people like objects, lines of code. In that moment, Eleanor saw his madness ran deeper than she'd imagined. "You've already lost, Marcus," she said, her voice ice-cold. Eris made sure of that. "Eris?" Thorne sneered. "My wife's been dead for years, a weak soul crushed by the weight of great science. She wasn't weak. She left me one last gift," Eleanor said, her hand ready on a small tablet linked to the lab's internal network, accessed with Eris's provided password. Her key. Thorne's brow furrowed, confused. "Eleanor hit Enter Eris knew she couldn't steal your data, so she gave me something better. A wipe virus, coded with her own biometric signature. It doesn't steal your legacy, it burns it down. Instantly, the room's screens, displaying gene sequences and biological data, began to flicker. Then they turned red. A single line repeated across them. Thorne's smug face contorted. He lunged for the main console, typing frantically, but it was too late. His life's work, his obsession with immortality, the legacy he'd sacrificed everything for, dissolved into digital ash before his eyes. "No, no!" he screamed, not the cry of a god, but of a mortal man who'd lost it all. Security finally burst in, but they found chaos. Frank had unhooked Leo's machines and held the boy in his arms. Eleanor stood firm, tablet in hand like a weapon, and Marcus Thorne, once a titan, knelt sobbing amid glowing red screens. 6 months later, Maine's sky was clear. Eleanor and Chloe strolled along a white sand beach. No more skyscrapers, no more dark conspiracies. Just the crash of waves and cries of gulls. Leo had fully recovered and was placed with a family in witness protection. Marcus Thorne would spend his remaining days in a maximum security prison. His empire crumbled. Chloe picked up a flat stone and skipped it expertly across the water. She'd taught her mother how to do it. "What happens next, Mom?" Chloe asked, her eyes now clear, free of fear. Eleanor looked out at the vast ocean, then down at her daughter. For the first time in 20 years, a genuine, unforced smile spread across her face. "Anything we want, my little star," she said. "Anything we want." She hugged Chloe, and together they gazed at the horizon. They'd weathered the storm. Now, an ocean of endless possibilities stretched before them. They'd found each other, and that was the greatest legacy of all.